This is the news and talk of Texas. Now, it's the Rick Roberts Show on 820 AM, 99.5 FM, HD2, News Talk 820, WBAP.
Well, I know there's got to be a few 100 million more like me, just trying to keep it free. Yeah.
Rick Roberts starts right now.
All right, welcome 4 minutes after the hour. As we discussed earlier part in the week, Texas was the deadliest state for law enforcement officers last year. Something Dallas police were reminded of after the Richardson police officer was gunned down this week. I got with family and law enforcement, I talk to my daughter about this a lot. My son-in-law is a canine officer, and they have had discussions about it. Seems like, he's trying to do his job on two completely different fronts. What with, the political landscape, and trying to keep police officers safer. He doesn't have a situation with parking because he's a canine officer and he's got a take-home car, a Tahoe. But, when I read this, that the city council's public safety committee is going to hold some kind of briefing, to try and figure out how to bolster safety. And then I find out, there's not even, the parking lot's not even fenced. Well, we're going to get to that. That'll be finished in May. Wait a minute. You were able to take down Robert E. Lee's statue in the dead of night. In 24 hours, that thing was gone, but you can't finish a fence around the police station? Well, I'm not going to go off. I already have done that. Sergeant Mike Matta, he is president of the Dallas Police Association, is with me. And Sergeant, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm confused. I've built fences in my time, but what is taking so long to at least secure the police department itself?
Well, it's simple as facts is they don't view it as necessity. The police and fire are commonly placed on the back burner time and time again over other special projects the city chooses to put in front of us. We were made this promise in 2015. We're talking almost 3 years ago. We were promised by the mayor and city council to help fortify our police stations just for our own personal safety. So when we come into work to protect the citizens, and no movement has been done whatsoever as far as fencing in substation.
All right, we've got a bad connection, Sergeant Matta. I'm going to put you on hold for just a second. Let's see if we can get a connection that doesn't cut out every third word. Talking with Sergeant Mike Matta, president of the Dallas Police Association. I'm sorry, I don't get it. Why is the Dallas City Council there? Why are they dragging their feet? I mean, at the very least, they should be able to go into work, park, get through their shift, go back to their car, and get out of the parking lot unencumbered. I just went through, well, as a matter of fact, I went through a Dallas news article, the Dallas Morning News, and I had no idea that so much had happened at the Dallas Police Department. Forget the substations. This is crazy. Makes no sense whatsoever. All right, let's step aside. Do we have a better connection? All right. Sorry about that, Sergeant.
Not a problem.
I'm reading all this. What's occurred at the police stations? This makes no sense to me whatsoever. I mean, they can take Robert E. Lee's statue down in 12, 18 hours, but they can't fix a fence in 3 years.
Exactly. And the problem here is that we were made this promise in 2015. The mayor got up, city council got up, and gave us their promise that they were going to help fortify and protect the police officers who are then able to protect the public. Here we are, almost 3 years later, and we still have no fences around any of the substations. But you can check every single fire station, and every single fire station has a fencing around their parking lot. It's ridiculous.
Well, where's the buck stop with this, Sergeant? I mean, this is beyond wrong. The people of Dallas ought to rise up in a galvanized voice and say, look, hang on to your statues for a bit. Let's at least protect our cops. At the very least, you ought to be able to go to work and get through your shift and go home. I don't get this at all.
Well, and it's not like we don't have cause for concern. Not only did we have the event at headquarters in 2015, we've had the officers being shot on July. We also had the individual going to Southwest armed with 2 magazines and 2 loaded guns. We had the individual at Southeast attempt to burn himself up. We had Central, the cars that were smashed in. These are events that are happening over and over and over again, but yet we still get placed on the back burner and nothing is done. The money's been allocated, but it's obviously taking entirely too long for the left hand to tell the right hand that let's get some work done.
Well, yeah, I see that the money has been earmarked. It's not like they're trying to figure out where to get the dough. They've got that. I just don't understand why nobody's taking any action. I mean, I don't need the city council or even the mayor to come out in front of a TV camera and tell me how much he's concerned or she's concerned with police. Just do something. Do something that'll tell me more than, a soundbite from the evening news.
Well, and it's all about your priorities. It's about getting things done. You said it yourself. When it's a priority to them, being whether it's statues, parks, bridges, or golf courses, they find a way to get it done as fast as they need it done. When it looks at something that is, we'll get to it when we get to it, and then they use the excuse of, well, we have a process. We have to put it out for bid. We have to go find vendors, and we have a system. Well, that system isn't followed when they need their things done. And we have officers out there who are risking their life every day to protect the public. The least this city could do is step up and build a fence, for God's sakes.
If people listening, if they want to voice their concerns to somebody that is in charge of at least building a fence, how do they do that?
Well, what they need to do is they need to contact their city council person of their district and let them know that this is important, that this needs to get done. The money is there. A survey was done a year and a half ago and was asked, in the new budget and in the new bond package, what would you like done with your money? The number one thing was infrastructure, streets, sidewalks, water. The second thing was public safety. Well, where did that fall when it came to the bond package? It fell all the way to the back to where the fire and the police had to beg to get money for these things to help their station safer. We have lost our way. This is not the city that works. It's the city that works when it wants to work. And it needs to get back to doing their job, what they were elected to do, and do what the citizens of Dallas have asked them to do time and time again.
Talking with Sergeant Mike Matta, he's the president of the Dallas Police Association. Check and see if he can stick with me, because I've got a question. I've got a question for the president of the Dallas Police Association. How safe is the city of Dallas? And what needs to be done not only to make police officers safer, but to make all of us safer? We'll take his answer next. Welcome back. 2:16 the time. I'm Rick Roberts. This is the Court of Public Opinion. Talking with Sergeant Mike Matta, president of the Dallas Police Association. Sergeant, before we went to break, I asked the question, just how safe is the city of Dallas, Texas, in your estimation?
Well, in saying we're doing the best that we can, but we have minimal resources, and we're still trying to give the citizens the best possible product we can. The problem is we're not hiring enough officers, and we're losing the officers that we have. And so sooner or later, you're going to stop doing more with less, and you're going to get less with less. And unfortunately, I think that's at the point where we're at.
Oh, we've heard all these news reports, and I know because, my kids talk about it all the time. Well, I say kids, they're adults now, but, my son-in-law is always looking I know that the Dallas police got something like $1.7 million. That money goes pretty quickly. I think my son-in-law's dog Remco could have probably used that up, just tearing up the inside of a couple vehicles. But they got a handle on it now. The situation is ridiculous. When you're looking for money for vests, when you're looking for money to pay officers will go where they're paid. And they're not paid as well in the city of Dallas. Why is that?
Well, as officers here in the city of Dallas, we know we're not going to be the number one highest paid department in the state of Texas. And that's obvious, and we accept that. But we certainly be past number 10. If you want a quality, high performance police officer, professional police officer, you have to give a pay and benefits package that is reciprocal to that. We hire the best that we can, and when we get those fine officers and they come here and we train them, we put $125,000 to $150,000 in each recruit to train them, only to lose them a couple of years later to another city like Fort Worth or Grand Prairie or Frisco, who are paying them up to somewhere near $13,000 to $15,000 more a year. That's very hard to tell a young family who's barely trying to make ends meet not to leave.
Yeah. I have this discussion every week with my kids. The question that the Dallas Morning News put out there: what more can be done to keep police safe? How would you answer that personally?
Well, first of all, we have to be allowed to do our job, and we have to be allowed to have the tools necessary to do our job. Unfortunately, unlike the fire department are always there to help, to rescue you in your time of need when you're sick. Unfortunately, when we get called, it's because there's usually something bad happening. And when we get there, we have to follow the laws of the state of Texas. Unfortunately, our ability to have discretion has greatly reduced over the last 10 years or more. And so when we get to a situation, most notably family violence situation, which are the most dangerous calls for a police officer to go to, we have very, very little wiggle room that allows us to do any type of discretionary arrest. We have to follow the law. And because of that, somebody usually ends up going to jail. We have to place hands on them, place them in handcuffs. And that's when it usually goes wrong. We need the public to understand, one, we are doing our job the best that we can. And two, especially when you're looking at drug laws, if there's things you don't agree with, change the laws. Don't get mad at the law enforcement officer because he's following the law. Get mad at the politician who you put in there for 30 years who allows those laws to stay the same and not change in any way, shape, or form. The public needs to understand the police department is here to serve them. We are here to protect them, but we can only do as much as we're allowed to do. We need more troops to help in answering these calls, to get there faster and to protect them better. And we need better pay. We need better benefits so that we can keep the best possible officer here in the city of Dallas to protect them. We need them to call their city council person, to call the mayor, and to tell them, do what is right so that these officers are compensated fairly, a fair market value throughout the DFW market. You do that, and you will have a strong police department again.
Yeah, unless I'm mistaken, and I may well be, we're a couple of hundred officers short of where we should be, are we not?
We're just under 800 officers. And that's the problem. You can only do so much with the resources you have. So the chief came here. She has a huge problems on her hand as far as staffing and police availability resources. She's trying to do the best that she can, but you can only do so much with limited resources. You will get a limited product with limited resources. And where we're getting at is that we're only going to be able to respond to the most serious calls.
Right.
Those quality of life calls that the public wants us to respond to, we're just not going to have the officers to respond to those calls.
Yeah, I talked with the chief the other day, and you're right. How's the morale? How's the morale of the police officers that are here in Dallas?
It's pretty bad right now, and it goes back to the fact that we're trying to do so much with so little.
Right.
The officers are having to, be redeployed, which affects their livelihood. It affects their home life. You got to remember, we have a serious responsibility of taking care of our families also. We all have husbands, wife, and children, and when you move us around, change our days off, move us to a different shift, it affects our home life. And at some point, they're going to say enough is enough, and they're going to go to another city that they are not going to have to do these changes within their livelihoods every time they turn around.
Right.
We need the city of Dallas to do the right thing and hire more officers so we can stabilize this department and give the best possible product and service to the citizens. That's what they pay taxes for.
As I read the Dallas Morning News and I did some vetting on my own, not having a secure place for police officers to just go to work. I mean, if you drive a city bus, you've got a fence around your work area. It's ridiculous. When I found out, wait a minute, what? Yeah, there's no fence around the parking lot for the police officers to go in a secured area. I mean, people can just walk, like the guy with the sledgehammer. If he can get that close to a dozen police cars, he can get that close to a police officer. That needs to be fixed like before the end of the show today. That's not something that, you look at and say, well, we'll get to that in 6 months or 7 months or a year or 2 years or 3. That's unacceptable.
Well, and the most ridiculous part is, in the 3 years it has taken to get this done, the city of Dallas has spent $12.9 million in man-hour payroll to guard these stations. Every station, 24 hours a day, has 2 officers sitting in a squad car guarding a station that a fence could guard, and those 2 officers could be out answering calls, making it safer for the public. But we got no problem wasting $2.9 million when it will take less than $1.5 million to do all the substations at one time.
All right, I've got to answer you again at the risk of being redundant. This audience shut down the ABC switchboard the other day on an issue. They can sure make their voices known. What can we do to help you help us? I know it's kind of a silly question, but it hits at the heart of it. I don't have a lot of faith in the mayor, but that's just me. I'm not speaking for you. What can the people do to make their voices heard to try and help the police officers that are trying to help them?
We need them to reach out to their city council. Tell them this needs to be done. We also need them to tell that city council that we need to ensure that we have enough police officers to not only just answer calls, but to make all quality of life calls and services throughout the city safe. To do that, they need to do the right thing and fund their police and fire. It's a necessity in this city. If this city is supposed to grow, if you want the Amazons to come to the city of Dallas, their employees, who will then be citizens of the city of Dallas, need to feel safe. And without the right number of cops to do it, those companies will not come here.
Good point. Good point. Sergeant Mike Matta of the Dallas Police Association president. I really appreciate you checking in with me. Hopefully we can talk again soon. And, maybe, just maybe, some of these city council people will wake up and smell the coffee and say, maybe we ought to just finish this up. Sounds to me like the right thing to do. Sergeant, thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate you being here. 2:26 the time. I'm Rick Roberts. Your call straight ahead in the court of public opinion. All right, 2:33 the time. I'm Rick Roberts. This is the court of public opinion. Your voice, your opinion, yes, even your attitude on the issues of the day. Sergeant Mike Matta, president of the Dallas Police Association, has graciously accepted an invitation to stick around for a little bit to get his thoughts on law enforcement as it applies to these mass school shootings. And of course, the latest one just a day or so ago in Florida, 17 killed, 14 injured, 1 critical, I believe. I listened. And I'm only speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for anyone else. I don't know how this mayor got elected into Dallas, Texas. I listened to this impromptu speech on the street about the school shootings, and basically he gave me a narrative of what I already know. let me ask Sergeant Matta. Sergeant, we've seen this all too often. Columbine and it goes Connecticut. It goes on and on. In your estimation, from a police officer standpoint, we need to make these targets harder. Do we not?
We do. And to be honest with you, I believe we need more police officers in schools. Now, I understand there's a segment of the society that don't want armed, uniformed officers in schools. But it's not a teacher's responsibility to be placed in a situation to where they have to take a life of another and use a firearm to protect themselves and the children. They're there to teach. The police officers are there to protect the citizens and the children of this city. Allow us into those schools. They already have a school marshal bill that was passed, HB 1009,
right,
and it was passed by the 83rd legislature. Let's just expand that. Let's let the officers, and you can even put them not in uniform, put them in plain clothes with a non-visible firearm, but put them in there and let them be a part of the school. Let them be a substitute teacher. Let them be an assistant coach or an assistant counselor. Let them teach a class in criminology. Let them be a part of the solution and also be a part of every school and every scholastic lesson being taught to these children. That way they're there, ready to handle a situation in case it happens.
When something like this does occur, minutes count. They truly do. And I don't care who you are. I mean, I was the black sheep of the family. I went to law school. Everybody else was in law enforcement at a regional or federal level. But they don't live on my front porch. They don't live in my radio station. It's going to take them a little bit to get there. And having somebody there all the time makes sense. And something else, the fact that they're in uniform doesn't bother me at all. As a matter of fact, it might be a way for some of these kids to be able to connect with the perception of law enforcement on a positive note rather than a negative note.
Absolutely. I would prefer that the officer be in uniform, but if it's going to help this happen and we have to compromise, we talk about of having community policing, community relations with our youth. What better way to take care of two serious problems in this country? One, school shootings, and two, the relationship between the police officer and the youth of our communities, rather than let's just put that officer in that school to where that officer can gain the trust of the youth and the staff together and be a positive impact in our areas. I guarantee you, if you open that up to officers who are already working extra jobs, you have officers that work 4 or 5 extra jobs a week. They work at a bank, they work at a grocery store, they work at a club or a bar. I guarantee you they would much rather work in an elementary school or a middle school actually making changes in the youth of today. Just make it possible.
That is so true. I know my son-in-law, he's been working, he provides security on Sunday to a huge one of these mega churches because they have an outreach program with homeless. And, sometimes these people aren't quite all there. So they pay him to show up in uniform with his take-home vehicle. He doesn't take the dog, but, it makes a connection between these people. The connections are really what we want. I mean, unless you've got a police officer on every corner, you need connections. You need to have the community connected to police and vice versa. I don't know why anybody would have a problem with this.
And the bigger thing here is that we've got to look at a long-term solution. Is this a long-term solution? No. Our elected officials need to get together and find out what that is. But this is a solution that we could enact very, very soon, and we could have immediate results on not just the safety of our children, but also the conversation, the relationships between the police and the citizens we serve. What better extra job is there than to get into a school and make maybe a young man or a young woman that possibly doesn't have a male figure in their home, and now you're providing that male figure, that person they could possibly trust, or maybe a female figure that they can possibly reach out to and trust. This is a win-win for everybody.
Well,
and it just
has anybody brought this up to again, I don't have a lot of faith in our mayor, but has anybody brought this up as a topic of conversation? I mean, we need to make the schools a harder target. You need to have somebody in the school that is ready to act. God forbid something like this happens. Is it a long-term solution? No, but it's an immediate solution. And then work on the other things as you have time. I mean, even a paramedic will tell you if you come up upon someone that's bleeding out, you stop the bleeding before you set the leg. I mean, and that's where we are right now. We need to protect our kids. And this sounds like a natural idea, and it sounds like something that it wouldn't take a whole lot of stuff to get it going, right?
I wouldn't think it would. And, the last thing I want to hear is that we don't have the money. Because my answer to that, my kids go to public school. I have a child in middle school and I have a child in elementary school, and they're worth everything I have to do to keep them safe. And that's why you would have hundreds of officers that would step up and do this job, because they too have children in school, and they would want an officer doing exactly what they're doing for somebody else's child.
That is
an easy fix.
That is so true. I know I broadcasted out of California for about 17 years, but I flew back and forth every 10 days, and we were extending Megan's Law out there. And I remember having to go to Sacramento. And, the first thing they said was, well, this is going to be too expensive to monitor these guys. And my question to him on the floor was, okay, give me the cost of the innocence of a child and I'll go fundraise it. How much is the innocence of a child worth? And we've got a place to start. Well, long story short, they ended up enacting the law, but it wasn't without a fight. Surely, after everything that's happened, we wouldn't get so much pushback that this thing couldn't be done. It sounds like a natural solution, Sergeant.
And every single person can't sit in their chair and say it would never happen here, because I guarantee you those families in Florida, those families in Colorado, those families in California thought that too. We can do something that's going to make this less likely to happen in our communities. Allow police officers to be active, positive roles, not only within the community, but within our school system. It's such an easy fix, and you have so many officers out there willing and wanting to do this.
Yeah, and I think it's a positive on several different levels, not just the immediate protection, but again, making those connections between kids and police officers. And man, if we ever needed that, we need that now.
Exactly. And we should never expect a teacher to have to take a life. That's not their job. Their job is to teach. It's a police officer's job to protect the public.
Once again, I appreciate you sticking around because I wanted your opinion on that. Sergeant Mike Matta, president of the Dallas Police Association. Bottom line, get on your phones. You did this with ABC. You can do this for our hometown. Call your city council member. Say, hey, what's going on? First of all, we can protect our police officers. Finish the fence. You got rid of Robert E. Lee in 24 hours. Put the fence up. And then let's talk about having an open discussion. Talk about putting police officers inside schools. Is that a long-term fix? No, but at least it will stop the bleeding right now, because this can happen anywhere. All right, 2:49 the time. Want to get to your calls. You've been very patient. My thanks to Sergeant Mike Matta, president of the Dallas Police Association. And remind me, one of you guys remind me, I got some stuff to say about Mayor Rawlings, like that's a surprise to anyone. But remind me if you would. Let's go to Jim in Rowlett. Jim, thanks for waiting. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm good.
Listen, your people are talking about, just going out there and putting these fences up. But, they have to get competitive bids and all this stuff in on these things.
How long does that take?
Well, let me give you an example. This was years ago. It was in Chicago. You may remember this. They had a tunnel underneath the Chicago River, and all those huge, office buildings are downtown, and it's, a lot of the big buildings run along that river. And they got a problem with one of the walls. It was deteriorating, and they needed to have it fixed or it was going to collapse. And they went ahead, and the engineers got a quote from somebody. They said, "Well, we can do it for $100,000," but and city manager said, "No, we can't do it. We got to get minority people in here. We've got to get competitive bids." And guess what happened? The wall failed. Did $1 billion worth of damage to the buildings next to the that were affected by it. And so for the one of a nail, the shoe was lost. For one of a shoe, the horse was lost. For the one of a horse, the king was lost.
Well, we're not talking about subterranean repairs here. As a matter of fact, they've already got 60% of it done. They think they may be through by May. You can put up a chain link barrier for a concert in about 8 hours. I mean, why not throw something up while you finish the permanent structure? We're talking about a fence. Not the channel between England and the United States. I mean, come on. This is a no-brainer, or it should be. Cops ought to be able to drive to work, park in a secured area, even if it's one of those concert venue type chain link fences up there. That makes a lot more sense than taking 2 cops off their beat and having them guard their own police station. How much sense does that make? I appreciate the car. That was kind of cool, what he said, but it doesn't apply. Or I don't believe it applies unless you've got some ridiculous, well, we've got to form a panel to convene a study to come out with a report so we can, look, just build the thing. You got the money. Let's go to, where are we going here? Bruce in Fort Worth. Bruce, thanks for waiting. How you doing, Bruce?
Just fine, thank you, Rick. As always, a great show. And Sergeant Matta was spot on. I have a couple friends that work for the Fort Worth PD, and they have had anywhere, Rick, from 600 to 800 Dallas police officers apply over at Fort Worth. Dallas has one of the worst departments in the United States. The morale is low. They're underpaid. They're cutting their pensions. And Fort Worth is the envy of the country. Our K-9, our SWAT team, our Kappa program, I mean, just all the way around. Our intelligence unit, they use the Secret Service, CIA uses it for the Super Bowls. It's the envy. By the way, Betsy Price, there's rumors that Betsy and the city council are going to start cutting the pay of Fort Worth officers and their pensions, and she better keep her hands off of those. But I'm simply saying that we are very blessed in Fort Worth. Mayor Rawlings needs to, like you said, Rick, quit worrying about ripping down Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson statues and transgender bathrooms and protect the police and the kids of our schools.
Amen, brother. Amen. I was gone at the time, flying back and forth every 10 days to California doing a show. How'd this guy ever get elected?
I don't know, Rick. It's a puzzle. Dallas itself, as a city, the police department has always had a checkered past, going back to the 30s and 40s with corruption and then the botching the Kennedy assassination. But the city itself has always had a good reputation. But this mayor is a joke. And by the way, speaking of if I can segue as you did with Sergeant Matta, I do a little motivational speaking. 20 years ago, I was in the Chicago Public Schools. Back in the day, they had policemen at every intersection, some armed, some unarmed, every intersection of those big inner city high schools. Florida, there's no protection. Dallas, Fort Worth, very little protection in the schools. And they can spend money on everything else except, and they're worried about red pencils traumatizing our kids at knapsacks and eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Somebody may have an allergic reaction. Why don't they really concentrate where lives could really be saved?
Amen. Amen. And you know what? The people that monitor this, that are going to take care of it, are you, the audience. Just like I saw with ABC the other day, you guys shut down their phone. I mean, you shut them down to the point where they called here. Will you tell him to quit? No, don't believe I will. So when it comes to something as important as protecting our kids, I have no doubt if the audience rises up, gets a hold of the city council, I don't know that calling the mayor's office would make any difference. I've heard this guy, and he's got a certain mentality that you're not going to change. That's why I ask, how do you ever get elected mayor here? But the city council just say, look, we got things to do. Put a police officer in this school. Put a police officer in that school. Well, we're short of police officers. Well, then hire them. and pay them a living wage so a police officer's family doesn't have to go to the store on food stamps.
Now, it's the Rick Roberts Show on 820 AM, 99.5 FM, HD2, News Talk 820, WBAP.
Well, I know there's got to be a few 100 million more like me, just trying to keep it free.
Rick Roberts starts. Rick Roberts starts right now.
All right, 3:04 the time. I want to get right to your calls. Wow. NBC5 has something. I'm going to play it for you. Dallas Mayor Mike Rawlings delivers impassioned, impromptu speech on gun violence. He didn't say anything. Yeah, he said nothing. Well, when are leaders going to lead? When are you going to lead? Okay, forgive me. Let me get to your calls. Let's go to Nathan in Arlington. Nathan, thanks for waiting. How you doing?
I'm doing fine, Rick. Thank you so much for taking my call.
You bet.
Couple of comments. Let's start with your Joy Behar, i.e. ABC issue. I was part of those that called in the other day. I really appreciate the fact that you made that clear and functional, because the conservative people in this country need to speak up. And that was over the top, past the line. We tend to be very, very forgiving, and I think certainly we can forgive her for her breach, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't speak up. And I appreciate the fact that you made that function and happen.
Well, you guys did all the work. I mean, you know, I have no way of knowing who called and who didn't until ABC New York calls here and says, make him stop. So good for you.
Well, at least it works. And now I want to touch on the basis of, or touch on this topic about the shootings and such. I have lived over 6 decades, and I have seen this country change. But people don't recognize it and won't accept it, or the filtering of the media, i.e. the other side, doesn't bring it out and it's not discussed. But this country, in the last 30 years at least, has been in a grand experiment of taking God out of the country. And the humanity of this country is based on being social. I mean, animals are not humans. Humans have behaviors beyond being DNA human. And that part of that's being social and being interactive and helpful. But the last 30 years, we have objectified violence. We have just taken God out. And if I want to stay secular, let's just say we've dehumanized people to the point where if you dehumanize someone such as another group, then they become non-human, then it's very easy to abuse them. And I think that's where we are right now. People say, what's happened? Why are guns, all these mass killings? Because in the past, we had barriers, and humans didn't do that. But now those barriers have been changed through years of abuse by Hollywood, by these video games. I mean, if you lay down, a professional individual, and for 6 or 8 hours a day, they destroy their mind with these video games where they just kill. Well, why are we surprised that people come out and start doing that? Because if you don't appreciate him, in this case, I don't know what this guy's mindset was, but you have to first, before you kill, in this case, you have to decide this person is not worthy of being human and therefore can be eliminated. That's my opinion.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right. I think, this all began when you take God away from anything, and I mean a concerted effort to remove God from something, you leave a vacuum that's going to be filled usually with with what the complete opposite is, which is evil, or in this case, secularism, which ended up being evil. It shouldn't be a surprise. And people have said, well, what would you do? Well, I think immediately you need to make the targets harder, whether that's ingress and egress of a building. You need to put a police officer on duty. And then at the same time, this didn't happen overnight. This no value for human life didn't occur yesterday. It's been years and years in the making, primarily due to liberalism run amok. So it's going to take a while to fix it. I appreciate the call, Nathan, very, very much. Let's go to Jack Jack in Fort Worth. Jack, how you doing?
Well, I'm doing well, Rick. Thanks for your show today.
Thank you.
I have about 3 points I'd like to cover. One, I agree with everything you said about morality, God, medicating kids, not spanking their bottoms. All of that is true. But a couple of things on the police department. I did 40-plus years at Dallas PD, and I take issue with the guy who tells us that we had a sketchy past. Dallas PD was one of the finest agencies in the country. Excellent.
Yep.
But through a series of madness and leadership and political correctness and affirmative action and all the other things that we've deteriorated, it's insane. But moving to today, on the pension plan, they raided our plan. They hammered 10,000 families, police officers, and firefighters. They took our cost of living raise. Mike and his group over there in the civilian side, they kept their civilian raise. They fixed their pension, and they aired us out to dry along with Mike Flynn, the state representative that we had hoped would stand up and do right. They took 13 years of my salary. They froze it. They put it in an annuity at 2% interest. Who wants to work at a place that treats people who work their whole adult life there? We will go to federal court. We will sue. We'll probably win. I'll probably be dead. That's one issue. The other is this thing about the school in Florida. What a horrible tragedy. The one thing that I would tell you is we have the ability to stop that. And I know that because I was in charge of the state thing, the music hall. I was in charge of concerts and football games and Texas OU. And we control the access points. We use people. We use metal detectors. We use bulletproof glass in some of the schools and temples in this city. And we do not let people into the schools or into the banks or into places where it's important. Down in Florida, there's 3,200 kids. They had a school resource officer, but obviously they didn't have a no-bag policy. They didn't have the school on lockdown during the day to keep strangers out. They didn't control their access. They didn't keep the guns out. And there's no way one cop in a school of 3,000 can be there because this kid changed the pattern. He shot. He went upstairs. He shot. He went back. He shot. He went to the third floor, chunked his stuff down, and walked out. And one officer in there, a school resource officer, it was too late. It was over 17 lives. The hero of that whole thing is the coach who stepped up, an ordinary person doing an extraordinary act of kindness, laid down his life for our children.
No, there's no doubt the coach was a hero. Perhaps saving lives. He is deceased, as are 17 other kids. Depending on the size of the school, the size of the potential threat, maybe it takes more than one police officer. Maybe it takes several. And I can hear people saying to me right now, Rick, you're talking about police officers in schools. Yeah? Well, we don't want that. Well, what is it you want then? We, through no moral absolutes, no God, no, if it feels good, then go ahead and do it. No right, no wrong, no consequence for action. This is a societal shift that has occurred over the last couple decades. You're not going to get rid of it overnight. And no psychobabble expert's going to be able to walk in and, give a 1-hour class. Okay, now everybody's fine. It doesn't work that way. It's going to take a while to turn the corner on how society treats itself. How society treats itself. And in the meantime, you got to do what you have to do. Great call. I appreciate the service very much. 3:13 the time. I'm Rick Roberts, News Talk 820 WBAP. All right, 18 minutes after the hour, 3:18 the time. This is Bruce in Carrollton. Bruce, thanks for waiting. How you doing, Bruce?
Hey, I'm here. Thank you very, very much for taking my call, Rick.
You bet.
This just has me so riled up. The fact that schools are still gun-free zones. The only people that have guns in these things are the terrorists, the mass shooters, criminals, and all the good guys are defenseless to protect the students. It just riles me. The coach would have been somebody that I believe that would have had his own weapon if he could have, and also the Marine that was killed. It just upsets me to no end. The fact that every school has over 100 teachers, and there'd be at least 3 or 4 that would get a concealed handgun license and probably carry if they could. Your response, please.
My response is this. Would you put a sign up in your front yard of your home? This is a gun-free home.
Absolutely not.
And why is that?
Because it just tells the bad guys, come here.
Exactly.
I'm an easy picking.
Exactly. It's I've used this analogy before. If you're a professional car thief, you've got 2 cars side by side. One's got the club on the steering wheel and blinking lights all over the dash, telling me it's got some kind of security system. The other one's got the window rolled halfway down and the keys in the seat. Which one are you going to take?
Well, obviously, the unprotected one.
Of
Why
course.
can't we get government to see that? It's just, it's like a liberal mindset saying, oh, we put a sign up and they'll make everybody feel good and be safe. Well, you might feel better about it, but you're a lot less safe. That's for dang sure.
Well, yeah, and that's why I go back. Would anyone in my audience, would you go home tonight and drive a sign in your front yard, this is a gun-free home? Of course not. As a matter of fact, you probably do the opposite. You put those signs all over your house saying, this home protected by XYZ security. You want people to know, hey, don't mess with me because you're going to be found out. You don't say, hey, come rob me because I don't have anything but a 9-iron to protect myself. Bruce, good call. I appreciate it. Kristen in Arlington. Kristen, thanks for waiting. How you doing?
Hi, Rick. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you.
Good. So the other day I was watching Fox, and they had a teacher from that school, and Shepard Smith asked her, well, President Trump is coming to visit. And she went off about how she could care less if President Trump comes because he cares more about something else than protecting the students at all these schools, that he needs to do something. And there just seems to be a mental breakdown that it's not on the president to protect our students. It's on our local government. It's on our city and our state and our, county.
No, I've heard the same thing. It's like, what's Trump going to do to protect our children? I don't know. He's in D.C. We're in Texas. What do you want him to do?
Exactly. My kids go to Kennedale, and they have cameras and a button that every visitor to that school has to push and tell who they are, why they're there, and they don't get in if it's not a legitimate thing.
No,
they protect our schools.
Makes sense.
We have cops on our schools, in our schools. They are uniformed Kennedale officers. I don't have a problem with teachers carrying guns either.
No,
they're going to protect our kids.
You do what you have to. Like I mentioned, my son-in-law. Most cops have side jobs, and my son-in-law is no different. It's a huge mega church, and this church is so big they have some property next to the church where they do. They help out the homeless, and they give food away and that kind of thing. And sometimes those people kind of lose it, the mentally ill, and they try to get over to, well, bottom line is they hire him every Sunday to go to the church with his black and white, his what he carries the dog around in, and, just basically show a presence. Because generally that's all it takes is just the presence of a uniformed officer in a black and white, and those people kind of stay where they're supposed to stay. And don't tell me it's not a deterrent. It is a deterrent.
Absolutely, 100%.
And I can't imagine anybody that would have a problem with a uniformed officer inside a school. Not in the climate we live in today. And now, is that a long-term solution? Probably not. But it's a short-term fix to stop these school shootings until we can, turn our heads around and try to shift socially back to some semblance of normalcy, because we sure don't have that right now.
Well, and it should also be noted that Broward County has one of the strictest gun laws in Florida.
Of course, this has nothing to do with gun laws. You could... No,
but that's why they don't protect our schools, because, everybody needs to not have a gun because, bad people follow laws. Right. Yeah,
exactly. That's why they're criminals. They, that's why I've never understood these gun buyback programs. Bring your guns in, we'll give you tickets to a Mavericks game. Well, if you're a carpenter, are you going to put up your skill saw and your Swanson Speed Square and all the rest? No, not any more than a criminal's going to give up the tool of his trade, which is his gun, for a basketball ticket.
No, and the whole thing about putting a sign outside your house, who in their right mind would say, hey, we're not protected? Well, that's what we've done to our schools,
exactly.
Right? By saying it's a gun-free zone. Just like those military recruiters. Oh, can't have our military in a recruiting office with their handgun. That just makes no sense. They're trained to use a weapon.
Yep.
Why would we, it's like all these places, we can't have a gun here and here. Okay, well, now we know where the bad people are going to go.
Well, and you can lay the blame squarely on the doorstep of liberalism, because that's where it comes from. And people don't want to hear that, but that's why you've got people that aren't aware that there are consequences for action. That there is, there is no freedom without some type of responsibility. We've raised up several generations of emotional cripples that have to curl up in the fetal position at their university and then be given cookies and hot chocolate as they go outside for the free pony ride because they're so upset about what's happened to the country politically. We're in a world of hurt. All right, 3:33 the time. Got to play that Mayor Rawlings. Somebody did this when I was gone. Who elected this guy? How did that happen? Who is he running against? Man. All right, let me get to your calls. Let's go to Chris. Chris in Denver, Colorado. Chris, thank you for waiting. I appreciate it. Oh, did I drop him? Okay. Don't know what happened there, guys. Okay. Let's go. We'll go to Eric in Waco. Eric, thanks for waiting. How you doing, Eric?
Hi, Rick. Thanks for taking my call. How you doing today?
Good. Thank you.
Before I pointed out a pretty huge glaring issue. I think some people are dancing around but haven't really hit the nail on the head. One of the first things I wanted to ask you real quick is why haven't we had one of these mass shootings in a private school?
I can't answer that. I think the mindset is probably different in private school, parochial school, certainly home school.
Culture and security. There's two different things there. That's what I wanted to get to in regards to funding. And one thing that I wanted to point out is that we can spend, $700 billion, throw another $300 billion on top of it for national defense. We can maintain a military presence in over 100 different countries. We can put an infrastructure bill of $1 trillion together. We can defend every federal installation, every federal building, administrative building, state, county, local, sports complexes, everything like that. We've got the allocations and funds because that's a priority. That's a priority on where those funds get spent. Yet, one of the most precious things, if not the most precious things for the future of our country, we can't allocate the funds to ensure that our government public funded schools from the public purse are not adequately defended.
No, you're probably right. That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. That's a very good point. Why don't you hear about these type of things happening in parochial schools, private schools? I think there's a lot to that. I hadn't thought about. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to bring it up because, I'm not obviously not a very big, huge fan of the federal state, and the way that they do things, most especially with the galactic amount of waste that we see on a year-to-year basis that is just absolutely absurd. And they waste so much money that just reallocating or cutting or shifting the waste into the protection of our children would alleviate a lot of these problems, while in the short term, like what you were saying earlier, and then in the long term we can work on the socio-cultural type issues that are ultimately causing these things, which really starts at home with the parents. We can argue semantics all day long in regards to guns and little fancy pieces of paper that criminals ignore. But the real truth of the matter is that the government does not care about us. You can look at that in regards to FBI crime statistics and data tables on what is the primary firearm that's responsible for most of the death around the country every year. It's the handgun.
Right.
Right. But the rifle, it doesn't matter if it's bolt action, a semi-automatic repeating rifle, that doesn't matter. It accounts for less than 3% of the yearly firearm homicides. But you don't see a huge campaign going after the handgun. That's because the handgun or the shotgun doesn't have the possibility to defend very well against the federal state if unfortunately something like that ever came down the pipe. We've seen it historically all throughout history. You can't give them up ultimately for that reason. But a mil-spec repeating rifle most especially has that capability. So they're not really concerned about our safety, because if they were, the campaign would be going after the handgun.
Yeah.
They're concerned about their safety. And that's what's really sad, is that they obviously have demonstrated time and time again with multiple FBI failures, numerous counts of corruption, politicization of the FBI and other governmental agencies. They don't care about us. It's all just a song and dance and a dog and pony show. And ultimately it comes down to the people to say, hey, that's our money. It's our public purse. Reallocate it to the protection of our students while we shift and change the culture in this country.
Well, I think you're right. You go to the Second Amendment, and a well-regulated militia has now been argued, the collective rights theory, which is the right to protect yourself. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. Most liberals will stop right there and say, well, we don't have to do that anymore because we have police officers and military. Well, that's beside the point. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Pretty self-explanatory. That language in itself has created considerable debate regarding the amendment's intended scope. What was the intent? On the one hand, some people believe that the amendment's phrase, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, creates an individual constitutional right for citizens of the U.S. under this individual right theory. The United States Constitution restricts legislative bodies from messing with you when it comes to firearm possession. Or at the very least, the amendment basically renders anything that prohibits or restricts regulation as unconstitutional. And then on the other hand, some scholars point to the language of well-regulated militia to argue that the framers intended only to restrict Congress from legislating away a state's right to self-defense. I think we're pretty clear. I think we're pretty clear on what it is. It's not going away. And this is not the problem anyway. The hardware is not the problem. It's not. It's why are people devaluing life to such an extent that they walk in and kill a bunch of first graders or a bunch of innocent high schoolers or a bunch of people eating at McDonald's? Why do they devalue life so much that they can do that? Well, that's a societal shift. I mean, there are lots of reasons you can look and say, okay, well, the shift started here with this video game or those abortions or, well, you can't look at any one thing. It's all of this stuff combined. All right, 3:41 the time. Your call straight ahead in the court of public opinion. All right, 3:45 the time. Welcome to Court of Public Opinion, the Rick Roberts Show. Glad you're along. 1-800-288-WBAP, 1-800-288-9227. This is Chris in Denver, Colorado. Chris, somehow, someway, we got disconnected. How you doing?
Yeah, sorry about that, Rick. My friend Bailey and I were talking about the Second Amendment overall the other day, and we got to thinking, with all this debate about the ambiguity of the Second Amendment and asking what it means. Does it mean the right to bear arms? Well, does that mean a surface-to-air missile or a handgun or an AR-15? The Supreme Court has interpreted a lot of that in D.C. versus Heller. However, is it conceivable that we're going to reach a kind of pinnacle in this country? These kind of shootings are going to get so pervasive that we're going to require a constitutional convention to scrap the Second Amendment altogether and start from scratch. And we come together as a country and decide what a gun is, where it should be, and just start all over.
Are you asking me if I believe that will happen?
Well, is that conceivable, and would you support something like that?
No, I wouldn't support it. I think it's just fine. Well, we don't have a hardware problem. We have a software problem. If you look at this, it's pretty simple. As I'm a student of the Founding Fathers, and it's pretty clear what they were doing at the time, and it's pretty clear what the Supreme Court has ruled on since that time. The District of Columbia versus Heller, that was a landmark case in which the Supreme Court, and I don't recall what the vote was, but they held that the Second Amendment protects your right to possess a firearm, unconnected with any service in militia or any other group, shall we say.
That's
it was
true,
about,
but it also left it up for the state. It said that you have the right. The arms were a handgun, and it was for protection within your home. Then, if the states want to expand that or more broaden that, they can be left up to do that. So this whole 180 I'm seeing with the NRA trying to get the kind of across state lines with the concealed carry permit, I think totally usurps states' rights. I mean, where's the right wingers on the whole 10th Amendment thing?
Well, personally, I think anyone that has demonstrated some proficiency, just like you have to demonstrate proficiency to drive a car and other things, anyone that's demonstrated some proficiency, has passed a background check, is not certifiably insane, ought to be able to carry a firearm wherever they want. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah. No, I know. And so I'm glad you're not totally libertarian like I hear some people on gun ownership. That you have some standards that we should implement.
I don't think they I don't think they belong in the hands of people that are have demonstrated that they're mentally unstable. I don't think somebody just ought to walk down, buy a gun, and walk out the front door when they don't even know how to, chamber a round. We all have to demonstrate some proficiency to do certain things. I don't find firearms any different than that, but I think you ought to be able to go across state lines or anywhere you want.
Yeah, no, and I guess that's where we would disagree, but I think in the larger context of the gun control debate, I mean, when you look at studies, I heard some of your other callers talking about some like violent video games and things of that nature, thug culture. A lot of studies have been done comparing mental health, access to mental health among other OECD countries, other wealthy countries out there, and if you line up all the societal ills, they're pretty much neck and neck with the United States. It's just that we're totally awash in guns. Like, yeah, you can hop into a truck and run over a crowd of people. That requires logistically a lot more planning and forethought. And sometimes, like this young man, his impulses could have been a fleeting thought, but he went down to the pawn shop and legally bought a gun. And, if he would have had to, how many kids would he have killed with a hammer before he was taken out? out. The guy had a powerful rifle.
Well, but, by the same token, had he had a hammer, there would be some on the left that would be calling for outlawing hammers. I mean, this is a very slippery slope once you go down the rabbit hole. Look, it's not by itself. It's not a violent video game. It's not the number of abortions committed in this country. It's not any one of these things individually. It is a cultural shift to where the value of human beings is going down, not up.
I think so.
No, go ahead.
No, I would agree with you, Rick, and you can also draw a parallel between on SSRI uptake inhibitor drugs, where you tend to have less empathy. It kind of like numbs that prefrontal cortex in your brain that sees people less as people and more as objects, like targets. And so that's a discussion. Are we over medicating people on these drugs that don't necessarily need them?
No, I agree with that 100%. 100%. Calling from Denver, Colorado, are we?
Yeah, Denver. I've been following you since your KFMB days, actually, and I didn't know that you had moved to a solid red state. You're kind of more at home in this market.
Well, I started my talk show career on Lawrence Street there with 85 KOA. That was
back with Mike Rosen and Peter Boyles.
Boyles, all the folks. That's where I started, yeah.
And Gary Tessler, actually. He was before Rosen. But, Denver's a great talk market. Still lots of really great local talk. KOA is still the blowtorch in the region. But Mike Rosen retired.
Right.
But there's a lot of changes going on at KOA. Obviously there's going to be some restructuring, but there's still really great local talk. Did you have a show in Denver?
I was hitting all or portions of 38 states, Canada, and Mexico just on that stick alone. It was amazing. That was great program director at the time, Chris Olinger. And just had a great time, went from there to KCMO in Kansas City, and then, believe it or not, here at another radio station.
Did you work with the late Rick Barber?
Oh, yeah, I know Rick very well. He's passed away, but yeah, I knew Rick very well.
Yeah, Denver just really has some, real storied talent, and I'm lucky enough to be in a market where I think a lot of that's really valued. It seems like Dallas values local talk, whereas a lot of the markets are, I listen to Bob Beckett on KCMO, but it seems like a lot of markets are switching to, the syndicated stuff, and I think that the local voices need to be heard, and, so I'm glad that WBAP, you and Chris Salcedo, and there's still some great local programming out there, and I hope it won't go away.
Well, I appreciate it very much. And yeah, as far as talk radio, Denver's a good town because you've got the People's Republic of Boulder just right down the road. So, and I'm being...
yeah.
I appreciate the call very, very much. All right, we'll get back to your calls and do away with the Second Amendment. No, I don't think Americans would allow that. I don't think that would ever happen. Taking it back to the base and building it from there? Nope, don't think so. 3:54 the time, 1-800-288-WBAP, 1-800-288-9227. Your voice, your opinion, your attitude on the issues of the day. That's what we're about, Monday through Friday from 2 to 5. I'm Rick Roberts. This is News Talk, 820 WBAP.
Well, I know there's got to be a few 100 million more like me, just trying to keep it free. Yeah.
Rick Roberts starts right now.
All right, 4 minutes after the hour. Earlier we had on Sergeant Mike Matta, president of the Dallas Police Association. I don't get it. We can get rid of Robert E. Lee's statue in 24 hours, but we can't put a fence around police department parking area to keep cops safe when they go to work. But then again, Mayor Mike Rawlings, he delivered an impromptu, impassioned speech on the streets of Dallas yesterday, calling on President Trump and Congress to establish a blue ribbon panel to end mass killings. Basically, a blue ribbon panel is a group of people trying to find the answer to one particular issue. All right. That sounds about right for a Democrat. Now, this is courtesy of NBC Channel 5. It's a little hard to hear. Maybe that's good. I don't know. But let's listen to the mayor. He's great on removing statues, not so good on giving answers that are tough answers. There's no doubt about it. I don't know exactly what the mayor thinks Trump is supposed to do here. It sounds to me more like something we ought to be taking care of here at home. So, Mayor Rawlings.
Tom connection. My best friend in high school, and has been my best friend my whole life, son, went to that high school and lost one of his best friends. So I'm grieving with my personal family as well. And I'm so frustrated with the leadership of this country. It's like every time this happens, there are deer in the headlights. All they can say is our thoughts and prayers are with people, and this is pure evil. And I really believe that God wants us to act, and not just talk. Now, it's a complicated issue, but leadership is not complicated. If I was President of the United States, today I would call for a blue ribbon commission to end mass killings in America. There are a lot of reasons for them, but no one's dealing with this issue in a holistic way and laying out the key strategies that we need to deal with. There's not the courage that's necessary to deal with this issue, and I'm very disappointed. So, the president probably is not going to listen to me, mayor of Dallas, Democratic mayor in Dallas, but I'm writing a letter to both our senators and our congressional team here in the Dallas area and ask them to establish this for the U.S. Congress. The Congress can pull this together. We can go to the moon. We can fight cancer. We can launch Bitcoin. We can do all these wonderful things, but for some reason, we can't stop killing in the streets of the United States. And leaders have got to step up and lead. And they need to get the hell out of the way and let the people lead. So I'm asking for our congressmen, our senators, to call for this sort of commission. And let's stop fighting over tactics when we don't understand the root cause. There's mental health. There's gun control. There's social media. There's public safety in schools. It's a complicated issue, but I am very confident that the United States of America can solve this issue. This is not too big for America. Come on, people. Step up.
It's happening more and more in schools.
All right. This guy is an absolute, in my opinion, moron. And just like every other Democrat, the government's got the answer. The government's got, they can come up with a blue ribbon pan. What a moronic thing to say. Are you going to change society with a letter, Mayor Rawlings? You know, the problem is liberalism run amok. The problem is we've raised generation after generation of emotional cripples. The problem is there's no consequence for action. The problem is there is no freedom without responsibility, but we don't teach that. And just like every other Democrat out there, well, the elected officials need to get together. Elected officials, my butt. What has that got to do with anything? You know, this is a decay of our moral structure. Yes, there are moral absolutes. And while we're at it, how come you can get rid of a statue of Robert E. Lee in 24 hours, but it takes 3 years to fence off a parking area for police officers? Man, how did this guy get elected? Seriously. All right. Okay. Let's go to Roy in Dallas. Roy, thanks for waiting. How you doing, Roy?
Terrific. Thank you very much, Rick. You're always a great host.
Thank you.
As usual. And great program again today. I have to elaborate a little bit further for the citizens of Dallas so we can get the attention of the city leaders of the city council, including Dallas Mayor Mike Rollins and the assistant city manager, John Fortune, who oversees the Dallas Police Department and the Public Safety Committee. They need to call 311 and just flood 311 for one thing. That's how you get a hold of the city council members' office phone numbers. The other thing, too, is that last year we have to reflect back when the State Fair of Texas came upon the city of Dallas. They had a perplexing problem about staffing and providing safety for visitors and the fairgoers of the State Fair of Texas. Who did they go to? They looked to the Dallas Police Department, did they not? And whenever Mary Kay has their convention in downtown Dallas, who do they come to? We want safety on the streets for the visitors who come in nationwide as well as worldwide for the Mary Kay convention visitors. We have to provide security and support at Dallas Love Field to make passengers and visitors who fly in and out of Love Field. And even further, whenever a dignitary comes into downtown Dallas or Dallas, like this weekend, Vice President Mike Pence is coming into Dallas tomorrow. The Dallas Police Department has to provide support for the FBI, the ATF, and the Secret Service whenever we have a dignitary come in. Not only that, Mike Rollins has protection from the Dignitary Protection Service. Is that ever mentioned? Don't think so.
No, all I know is I look at this, the leadership in Dallas. I don't know, maybe the city council is afraid to, get their back up against this mayor. I've never seen such a goofy mayor, and I've worked in Southern California. There were some goofy mayors, but nothing that even approaches this guy. No, we need to protect our schools, and at the same time, if we're going to stop this thing, society's got to shift. It's got to shift where people realize there is no freedom without responsibility. There's consequence for your action. Life is not fair. You're not a victim just because you get up in the morning, and that's the message of Democrats. You got to stop it. You got to stop it. All right, we'll be back with your calls next. All right, 18 minutes after the hour, 4:18 the time. Right back to your calls. Let's go to Chris in McKinney. Chris, thanks for waiting. How you doing, Chris?
Hey, Rick, how's it going? You are a great American, sir.
Thank you.
Well, I kind of coined that from Sean Hannity a few years ago when he had people say, "Oh, sir, you are a great American," and so I kind of think it sticks. Listen, Rick, first off, I like your show because you're a very laid-back host. I've kind of noticed that. I'm the guy that called in when you had the Reagan executive director of the Reagan Library on. I said, Rick, I got a bone to pick with you. Why'd you ask him the question, what could President Trump do to do a better job? And I'm the guy that called in that day, if you remember that. And it was just, I don't want to get off on that because that was another day, but I'll just make one comment about it. President Reagan lived during a different era. If he'd had Twitter at his disposal, he probably would have used it and used it very effectively, I might add. But anyway, President Trump's just using a 21st century technology, and it works. But anyway, he's getting his message out there. But look, I wanted to comment, the reason for the call, I wanted to comment on that mental munchkin called Mike Rollins, the mayor of Dallas. If brains were dynamite, this guy couldn't blow his flipping nose. And, I heard that segment, and I'm thinking, listening to this guy is like political waterboarding, okay? He is a total – I'm serious, Rick. I listened to you earlier. You said, man, how did this guy even get elected mayor of Dallas? Well, you know what? It's because Dallas County, because of a lot of the minorities in the inner city, it went blue. And that's how a Democrat mental munchkin like that would get elected. But I listen to the stuff that comes out of this clown's mouth, Rick, and I'm like, Rawlings, just shut up. Okay, I'm losing IQ points listening to you mental munchkin. Okay? It's like, I don't know, Rick. I think that's the Democrat Party platform. It's like they never, we had this tragedy happen down in Florida where 17 people were gunned down by this little monster. And you know what? I ceased calling him a young man when he decided to go into that school and unload magazines of ammunition on innocent people that didn't deserve to die like that. He graduated to the monster category when he did that. So, and for Rawlings to use, and Bill Nelson, another prime example, good old Democrat, never let a good tragedy go to waste. He's on there going, well, yeah, gun control and blah. I don't know if you heard that clip by Bill Nelson, that segment they played to him earlier.
Yeah.
But, Rick, their party is despicable. They use this. They're just waiting with bated breath. It's always seething under the surface with the liberal Democrats to use a tragedy where people lose their cotton-picking lives to advocate, guns are evil, guns kill people. No, jackwagon, evil people pulling the trigger of guns kill people, okay? And for you to politicize it, for Rawlings or Bill Nelson or any other Democrat to politicize that, shame on them, shame on their flipping party. And you know what? That's why they will never occupy another White House seat as far as the presidency goes, and they better get prepared to take it in the shorts in the midterm elections in November because it's coming. And the voters are going to remember that they're politicizing this crap. And, it's not crap. People die. God bless them. But they're politicizing it, and they're turning it into a dog and pony show that it really doesn't need to be. And it denigrates the memory of those people that died in such a heinous way that the Democrats use this as a platform to politicize it and say how evil guns are. And you know what? It's just despicable in my book, Rick.
Anyone, and I said it yesterday, anyone that stands out on a podium and says, well, this is why we need gun control, is either the dumbest person in D.C., and that would be a contest, or they're simply being disingenuous. This isn't about gun control. This is about a society that doesn't value human life anymore. And specifically younger people that don't have a lot of life experience. We're graduating from public government schools, emotional cripples that can't deal with failure or disappointment. So instead, they simply take it out this way. That's not going to change overnight. And banning guns isn't going to change that mindset. It's going to take a lot more work. But in the meantime, we got to protect our kids. And as far as I'm concerned, you put uniformed officers inside the schools and, maybe some people will wake up. I hope so. Oh, by the way, speaking of politics, how much money, how much time, how many resources, how much money was spent on the, I wish I had a Russian collusion case? Russian collusion coming to a theater near you. Well, it was theater. Have you heard? As a matter of fact, go ahead and play that promo.
Trending now on WBAP, the Russian election probe.
Now, there is no allegation in this indictment that any American was a knowing participant in this illegal activity. There is no allegation in the indictment that the charged conduct altered the outcome of the 2016 election.
The aftermath of the Parkland, Florida high school shooting.
On January 5th, 2018, a person close to Nicholas Cruz contacted the FBI.
All right, so Mueller's done his indictments. No American was involved. Trump wasn't involved. How much money have we spent on that? How many of your tax dollars went to chase these ghosts around the room? How much? I'd like to see an accounting, and then I'd like to see that given back as a tax refund. Would that be nice? And if anyone thinks The Russians just now got involved in trying to screw with our elections. You're laboring under a sad misconception. It's been going on for years, and truth be known, we probably do the same thing to them. So sorry, all you Trump haters out there, didn't go your way, did it? All right, back with your calls next on News Talk 820 WBAP. 4:33 the time. John Lott with Fox had a pretty good piece. You know, these gun control advocates are pretty sure they're occupying the moral high ground in the aftermath of the Florida shooting. Left 17 dead, 14 injured. They are accusing pretty much Republicans of having blood on their hands. Well, it's no longer just activists like Chelsea Handler. Even mainstream liberals, like the political scientist Norm Ornstein is using the phrase. If you're on the right, you have blood on your hands. What gun control nuts' new hot number is that they keep saying there have been 18 school shootings so far this year. That's a gross exaggeration. To get to 18, you have to count every instance from kindergarten through college where a gun was fired on or near a school property. That includes a case where a police officer accidentally discharged his firearm, as well as suicides, like the 31-year-old military vet with no connection to a school who killed himself in a school parking lot. So if you exclude suicides, there have only been 5 cases where someone was actually shot at a school. Only 4 actually involved a gun being fired on school property, and only 2 of those resulted in fatalities. Now, I know, the devil's in the details, right? Well, I mean, they spew this stuff. You think it comes from a pseudo-celebrity, so it must be true. Well, there are the facts. In fact, gun control nut, their proposals would do more harm than good. They are the ones that oppose life-saving laws. Every time there's a mass public shooting, gun control advocates, they call for more background checks, right? Well, President Obama did so each and every time he spoke after a mass public shooting. Gun control advocates, they like to think there's a magic solution called a background check that would have prevented these school shootings, including what happened in Florida. You know, the proposed background check laws would not have prevented the attack in Florida, nor any other mass public shooting that's happened in the 21st century. But the background checks come at a cost. $55, I think, in Oregon, up to $125 in New York and Washington, with millions of mistaken denials because of false positives. The checks have confused the names of law-abiding good citizens with those who really are prohibited from owning guns. And those are the most vulnerable people, poor minorities, who are kept from being able to protect themselves and their families. I mean, well, what's his name? Senator Bill Nelson, Democrat out of Florida. He reacted to what happened on Wednesday by immediately saying the failure to keep people on the terrorist watch list from buying guns. What? This kid wasn't on a terrorist watch list? Many on the terrorist watch list are not suspected of being terrorist threats, and of the 2,000 people who have bought guns, not one single person has been accused of using a gun in a crime. The bill prohibiting these purchases never got passed because the Democrats didn't want to pass it. Even John Cornyn here in Texas, he offered it an alternative. Under his proposal, the U.S. Attorney General could, if he wanted to, deny a person on the terrorist watch list the ability to purchase a gun, but they'd need to prove, they'd have to have provable cause within 72 hours. You know, Democrats said that the time limit was too short, but instead of proposing a longer time period, They forgot it. They just basically said, well, we don't want any judicial review. What do you want then? You know, others mention a new assault weapons ban. How many times have you heard that? But even research funded by the Clinton administration concluded that the previous ban and limit on magazine size had no discernible reduction in how lethal gun violence was. Those who are blaming Florida on large capacity magazines that can hold more bullets don't understand how quickly magazines can be changed or how incredibly easy they are to make. But while Democrats keep pushing for gun control laws that won't do anything to help, they won't discuss the one change that might have made a difference. Might have made a difference last Wednesday. Abolishing gun-free zones, where general citizens are defenseless. How about that? You know, it's pretty hard to ignore that all the mass public shootings, especially in Florida, Orlando nightclub, the Orlando RV business, the Fort Lauderdale airport, that restaurant I can't pronounce, as well as Wednesday at the high school, those were gun-free zones. Those were places where guns are banned. Nationwide, over 98% of mass shooting attacks since 1950. 1950. 98% of these mass shootings since 1950 have been in gun-free zones. These killers might be crazy, but they're not stupid. They want to kill as many people as possible, including the Charleston Church in Colorado, the Batman movie theater in Santa Barbara, California. They explained that they picked defenseless targets where they knew no one would have a gun. So what's interesting is that even though gun control nuts are refusing the types of policies that will really save lives, they're claiming that others have blood on their hands. The same language hasn't been used against them. Maybe it should be. Go back to what I said before. How many of you are going to go out this evening when you get back from work, get to your home, and put a sign in your front yard, "This is a gun-free home"? How many of you are going to do that? I'm waiting. How many people are going to do that? Nobody's going to do that. That'd be stupid. That'd be like saying, hey, we have no way to defend ourselves at this home, so come on in and take my stuff. If any sign at all is going to be put up, it's usually one of those signs alerting people that you have some kind of security system. Gee whiz. I wonder what that means. That means these gun-free zones don't work. That lets the bad guys know the people there are defenseless. Does that make sense?
It does.
Good grief. I mean, you don't have to have a PhD in human behavior to figure this out. No, none of you are going to go home, have a professional sign made that you can pound into the front lawn that lets everybody know this is a gun-free home, and then light it up at night. Okay? Yeah, go ahead and put a little light on it. So the bad guys will, hey, wait, hold up. What's that? This is a gun-free home. Well, here we go. You're not going to do that. It should be noted that those mass shootings, 98% since 1950, happened in gun-free zones. So Democrats, my question is, who really has blood on their hands? All right, 4:46 the time. This is Clint in Cedar Hill. Clint, thank you for your patience. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing really good, thank you. And thank you for the program and for all that you say. And it's you're really refreshing. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And I was going to say one thing, but I'm going to move to something I think is more important after listening for so long. And that is, you're familiar with Alexander Solzhenitsyn.
Sure.
He spent 10 years as a political prisoner inside of Soviet Russia. Then he won a Nobel Literature Prize for his book, Gulag Archipelago. He was asked, how did Russia get from where it was in prior years to where it was then? And he said, we abandoned God. And I would like to say that when you remove God from culture, you end up removing any kind of viable standard of good and evil. And without God, we're left with nothing but a bunch of morally imperfect men and women, including me. And if I may, I'd like to just quote you a really quick Old Testament scripture. It says, if my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves, pray, seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, forgive their sins, and heal their land.
Well, if we could get everybody in D.C. To commit that scripture to memory and believe it, we'd be a lot better off. Very good call, Clint. I appreciate it. Judy in Little Elm. Judy, thanks for waiting. How you doing?
Real good. How are you doing, Rick?
Good.
Hey, I listened to your recording of Dallas Mayor and his little speech, and it seems to me that he wants to abdicate his job to President Trump, because isn't he head of the police department as mayor?
Well, if he's mayor, he'd be over the commissioner. Yeah, I suppose you could say that.
Okay, and so it's his responsibility to keep the schools as well as the people of Dallas safe. And he's calling on President Trump to come in and do his job for him, give him leadership. If I was a resident of Dallas, I'd be more than a little concerned about that. And it doesn't work anyway, because if you remember back when Katrina hit New Orleans and President Bush reached out to the mayor of New Orleans, he was told to mind his own business, basically. And,
yeah.
By the governor and the mayor. So,
well, here's the problem. I mean, the mayor Rawlings is, and based on what I've read, is above all else a liberal, and so a liberal always believes that government at some level is the answer to all problems. And you and I both know that's not true when it comes to, you can't legislate human behavior. I mean, you can legislate laws, but you can't crawl into the souls and minds of men. You can't do that. So that's what he's asking for.
Yeah. And, the whole gun control issue, I have another comment on that. If you look to history, if you look back in time, nobility controlled Europe because the people who were the serfs, the peasants, had no arms. They had no weapons, and they didn't know how to use them even if they had them. And that's how the nobility, which was a small percentage, controlled that whole continent. And if we give up our arms or we allow them to take them away from us, that's where we're going to be.
Yeah, we just need to, stop focusing on, I gave you the information about mass shootings since 1950. The liberals are saying, well, conservatives have blood on their hands, but 98% of mass shootings since 1950 have occurred in gun-free zones. Gun-free zones don't work other than to let the bad guys know who can't protect themselves. There have been several projects in Florida, as a matter of fact, where small towns passed a city ordinance. Every home must at least have a long gun, have a rifle or a shotgun. Crime went down almost 50%. The burglars and everybody else, they made an extra 20-minute drive into the bigger city. This is so obvious, or it should be so obvious. Zach, I've only got a few moments left, but they're all yours.
Sure. Thanks, Rick. I just want to say Mike Rawlings is a hypocrite and a moron. First of all, he's a hypocrite in the sense he's mocking, Trump about we don't need more prayers and thoughts and prayers. I recall pretty vividly him saying, relied on his faith when the shootings of the Dallas police officers occurred a year and a half ago. And he's a moron in the sense of talking about how we can put men on the moon. And so with that, we can be able to stop mass shootings at schools and other places. Why would that even be an example to you?
It's not.
It goes back to what you're saying. When people do stuff like what this kid did in Florida, this is all about their heart, man. There's no law of legislation that can ever be passed from the local level up to the federal government that will stop that. And why can't Democrats figure that out? But you know what? They're so obsessed with government control of people that they think the government's the answer to everything, even to convict someone's heart. No, there's evil people in this world since the dawn of age, and there will be until God comes back.
And the only way that we're going to change anything is we have to look at this pragmatically, put uniformed police officers in the schools, make the schools a harder target, because right now they're a soft target, and at the same time, hit your knees as often as you can and pray for a societal shift to where we start valuing our fellow human beings. Because if you don't do that, none of this is ever going to change. And yeah, that may require stop killing so many babies. I don't know, just saying. God's blessings to each and every one of you, whether you agree with me or not. That's always my priority. Have yourself a great, safe weekend, and keep it here on WBAP. We'll keep you up to date with all the developments of the Florida massacre. I'll be back Monday, your afternoon drive, 2 to 5 on News Talk 820 WBAP.
Hit it hard till the sun goes down. Nobody really seemed to care that we were living in the middle of nowhere. We just figured that's how it was, and everybody else was just like us, soaking in the rain, baking in the sun. Don't quit till the job gets done. That's the only way I know. Don't stop till everything's gone. Straight ahead, never turn around. Don't back up, don't back down. A full throttle, wide open.